Baltimore, September 1997. The Chesapeake Air Show features the stealth fighter F-117 Nighthawk as its main attraction. Onboard is Major Bryan Knight, a skilled pilot who amazes spectators with several passes through the skies. But suddenly, something goes terribly wrong. The first few minutes are filled with uncertainty as people wonder if the abrupt movements are part of the show. Soon, everything becomes clear as day. The plane begins to break apart in the air, the left wing disappears, and the aircraft plummets towards the residential area of Bowley's quarters. The image is lost behind the treetops, but suddenly, a fireball rises into the sky. Police sirens, firefighters, and military units complete the scene as they secure the area and evacuate the crowd. A few seconds were enough to turn the thrilling spectacle into a disaster. Thousands of lives put in danger, all due to a simple paperwork error. Since its introduction in the early 80s, the F-117 Nighthawk has always been known for grabbing attention. Whether for its extravagant design or its innovative features that later paved the way for modern stealth fighters, it's no wonder it became one of the main attractions during the Chesapeake Air Show held on September 14, 1997, near Baltimore. On that day, Major Bryan Knight was in control of the plane with the number 81 to 793. The show progressed as planned. A first straight and level pass at an altitude of 150 meters and 740 kilometers per hour surprised the audience as expected. Following this, a second appearance unfolded at a lower speed to allow the audience a closer look at the Nighthawk overhead. Finally, the third pass showcased the pilot's skill by performing an arc maneuver at just over 700 kilometers per hour. The crowd was ecstatic, and Knight could bid farewell with the satisfaction of a job well done. However, when it seemed that everything was over and it was time to head home, suddenly something went very wrong. Without warning, the plane started shaking violently and sharply turned to the left. The resulting G-force immobilized the pilot's head downward and forward, leaving him uncertain about the surrounding panorama. With great effort, he managed to see land and water outside the cockpit, but his main concern was discovering where people were located, as his experience told him that the chances of the aircraft flying safely out of this situation were very slim. Pilot Knight struggled to operate the controls, but the F-117 did not respond and descended rapidly. Now the pilot's sole objective was to turn towards the water to avoid catastrophe. Meanwhile, from the ground, nearly 12,000 people who had paid between $10 and $12 to witness the airshow became witnesses to the disaster. One attendee recalled in a later interview that the initial impression was to think it was a deception and all part of the show. When they realized it was real, they couldn't believe it was happening before their eyes. Others recounted how the fighter raised its nose upward before the plane began to disintegrate. According to reports, several pieces were ejected from the aircraft, and that's precisely what the incident images reveal. It was later explained that the left elevon deviated multiple times. This is a part that serves as a control surface for the aircraft, combining the functions of an elevator and an aileron. This caused significant oscillations that eventually tore the wing apart. As a result, the broken wing piece struck the tail of the F-117, immobilizing its vertical stabilizer. The fighter lost control and spun 90 degrees to the left in less than a second, sharply tilting to form an angle of attack. Shortly after, the Nighthawk's main landing gear deployed, likely due to the high loads or hydraulic pressure loss. There was no turning back. Marty Campanella, a commercial pilot attending the airshow, referred to that tragic moment and affirmed that the aviator remained with his aircraft as long as he could, but it was evident he had no control. As shown in the footage, the plane did nothing but plummet and crash to the ground. Just 5 seconds before the F-117 inevitably crashed into the surface, Major Knight managed to eject. He would later recount after the accident, "That was probably the toughest decision I ever made. I was afraid to pull those handles, but I realized I had to get out right then or I wasn't going to survive.
As he glided through the air, he witnessed his aircraft colliding with a residential area and exploding.
A 13-year-old boy emerged from his home in Bully's quarters, about 20 meters from the crash site, encountering the stunned pilot, who only managed to look at him and say, "I'm so sorry." The massive fireball attracted many people in the vicinity, who claimed to see Knight lamenting what had just happened and stating that he had tried to throw the plane into the water but failed. Amidst the chaos of the accident, fear of the extent of the damage grew, especially considering the large number of people living in the residential area where the F-117 crashed. Fortunately, the owners of the house impacted by the fighter were not present at the time, and there were no fatalities, and no one was seriously injured. Nevertheless, 4 people on the ground suffered minor injuries, while a total of 10 families had to be evacuated due to fires caused by the incident in several homes and vehicles. Firefighters took about 45 minutes to extinguish the flames, and after doing so, the authorities declared the impact site a national defense area. A 2.5-meter high tarp was placed around the site, and debris was secured in a containment area. At dusk, 2 buses filled with soldiers arrived to monitor the area, which ended up being illuminated and cordoned off. All displaced individuals, who lived on that block of Chester Road, were forbidden from returning to their homes for the day, so the Red Cross provided them with shelter. After gaining control of the situation, and with the advantage of having avoided fatalities during the incident, it was time to find out what had happened. The F-117 in question was part of the 7th Fighter Squadron based in Holloman, New Mexico. However, at that moment, it was temporarily located at Langley Air Force Base in Hampton, Virginia, to support community and military air shows on the East Coast. While immediately after the accident, Pentagon officials did not confirm that the plane had broken apart, they did not dispute the accounts of witnesses who also had video footage of the incident. Based on this, an investigation board was convened, including Nighthawk pilots and technical experts. Fred Trudell, a volunteer from the Northeast Division of the Yankee Air Force Museum in New Jersey, described the accident. The pilot did his standard flyover routine and was starting to make the exit. He began to go and climbed to 360 meters when the right rear stabilizer broke. The aircraft tilted upward, and this broke the nose where the avionics are. The pieces kept falling, and we could see that Major Bryan Knight was trying to aim the plane towards the water. He later concluded that the incident was due to a structural failure of the F-117, therefore, it was clarified that the pilot had not made any mistakes. On the contrary, he would later be considered a hero. Even Secretary of Defense William Cohen praised and acknowledged his courage for staying with the aircraft until the end. 3 months after the accident, it was reported that the incident was related to the absence of 4 fasteners that helped attach the elevon to the wing structure. The lack of these rivets had not been discovered earlier because the required inspection had not been carried out.
Records showed that maintenance was incomplete, and the tasks that should have been done 6 months before the Baltimore incident were not carried out due to limitations in contracts and budget. The simple act of not verifying the paperwork properly triggered a series of issues that ended with the worst-case scenario. Although there were no deaths to mourn, residents of the area agreed that this marked the end of airshows at the location. Beyond this episode, the F-117 Nighthawk continued to write its glorious history. Along the way, it encountered some obstacles, such as the destruction of one unit by the Yugoslav People's Army in March 1999. At that time, the stealth fighter was hit by AS-125 surface-to-air missile while participating in the Kosovo War. However, this loss could not overshadow its successful missions during the conflict. It was finally retired in 2008 to make way for the purchase of more modern stealth fighters like the F-22, leaving behind a rich legacy. Now, it's time to say goodbye. Thank you very much for joining us until the end. Stay tuned to our channel for our next video encounter.